What happens when the glitter of fame collides with the cold reality of the open road? Some of the most shocking celebrity deaths didn't come from scandal or illness, but from car accidents that stunned the world. One second they were icons at the height of their power, and the next their stories ended in twisted wreckage. From Hollywood rebels to royalty and rock legends, these crashes left fans speechless. But wait until you hear how some of them happened. James Dean, 1955. Rebel without a tomorrow. That's what the headlines should have said when James Dean's Porsche Spyder slammed into another car on a California highway. At just 24, Dean was already an icon thanks to Rebel Without a Cause. The world expected him to define a generation. Instead, he became its ghost. The accident happened in September of 1955. Dean was driving to a race in Salinas with his mechanic when he collided almost head-on with another car. Witnesses say the impact was so violent that Dean had no chance of survival. What makes the story even darker is the legend that followed. People whispered that his Porsche was cursed, pointing to a series of accidents involving the wrecked parts after his death. Dean's passing rocked Hollywood like an earthquake. He was the first star of his age to die so young, so suddenly, and in such a public way. Magazines splashed his face across covers, not with a new role, but with a death notice. Fans wept in the streets, and his image froze in time as the ultimate symbol of doomed youth. It wasn't just a car accident. It was the moment Hollywood learned that even its brightest stars could vanish at the speed of a second. And with Dean, the myth of the forever young legend was born. Grace Kelly, 1982. Grace Kelly lived a life that read like a fairy tale, Hollywood's golden girl who became a princess. But her story ended in a way no scriptwriter could have imagined. In September of 1982, Princess Grace of Monaco was driving along a winding mountain road when her car lost control and plunged down a cliff. Her daughter Stephanie survived, but Grace never did. The world reeled. Here was a woman who had gone from Academy Award winner to European royalty admired for her elegance and poise. To lose her in such an ordinary, brutal accident stripped away the glamour and left only grief. Newspapers couldn't believe it. How could someone who seemed untouchable be claimed by something as everyday as a car crash? Conspiracy theories bloomed, of course. Some whispered about mechanical failures, others about illness behind the wheel. But the official story was simple and cruel. She had a stroke while driving, and the road did the rest. Her death left Monaco in mourning, and Hollywood in shock. Kelly wasn't just a star, she was the embodiment of grace itself. And in one tragic moment that grace collided with reality in the most unforgiving way. Paul Walker, 2013. Few celebrity deaths in modern times hit as hard as Paul Walker's. The irony was almost too much to process. The star of Fast and Furious, a franchise built on speed and cars, lost his life in a real-life crash. It was November of 2013 when Walker got into a Porsche Carrera GT with his friend Roger Rodas. Minutes later, the car slammed into a pole and burst into flames. Walker had been attending a charity event that day, planning to return quickly. Instead, the world learned through breaking news alerts that he was gone at just 40 years old. Fans couldn't believe it. The man who had built a career on adrenaline, who seemed so in control on screen, was taken by the very machines he celebrated. The aftermath was massive. Filming on Furious 7 paused, tributes poured in, and his family mourned in private while the world mourned in public. The studio used CGI and Walker's brothers to finish his scenes, creating one of the most emotional goodbyes in movie history. That final drive into the horizon wasn't just a cinematic moment. It was a farewell etched into global memory. Paul Walker's death wasn't just tragic, it was surreal. It blurred the line between fiction and reality, leaving fans asking if anyone can truly outrun fate. Princess Diana, 1997. When Princess Diana's car crashed in a Paris tunnel in August of 1997, the entire world seemed to stop. Diana wasn't just a royal, she was the people's princess, adored across nations for her compassion and modern style. The shock wasn't just that she had died, but how she had died. Her car, chased by photographers, lost control at high speed. The aftermath was chaos, flashing cameras, police sirens, and desperate attempts to save her life. News broke in the early hours, and within minutes, millions of people knew that Diana was gone at just 36. The global reaction was unlike anything before. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, drowning the gates in flowers. Televised funerals reached billions. She wasn't just mourned, she was canonized in the public imagination as a symbol of light extinguished too soon. The crash also ignited endless debate. Were the paparazzi responsible? Was it reckless driving? Or simply fate? No matter the theory, the result was the same. The most photographed woman in the world had died because of the very machine meant to carry her safely. Princess Diana's death remains one of the most shocking of the century, a reminder that even fairy tale figures can meet the harshest endings. Jackson Pollock, 1956. The art world still shudders at the way Jackson Pollock's story ended. Known as the wild genius of abstract expressionism, Pollock lived fast-painted ferociously and carried a reputation for chaos. That chaos caught up with him one summer night in 1956. Driving near his home in East Hampton, Pollock lost control of his Oldsmobile convertible. The car flipped, killing him instantly and taking the life of a young passenger. He was just 44. The tragedy wasn't just personal, it reshaped modern art. Pollock had already revolutionized painting with his dripping, splattering style. Critics loved him, hated him, but couldn't ignore him. And then suddenly, he was gone. His death created an eerie parallel to his work, a life of explosive energy cut short in a violent moment. For many, Pollock's accident symbolized the destructive side of genius. His demons, his speed, his recklessness all collided in that final drive. In a way, his death froze his reputation. He would forever be the bad boy of art, the brilliant painter who couldn't escape his own velocity. Pollock's crash proved that even the most untamed creativity can't outrun reality. His legacy is still splattered across canvases worldwide, but the man himself ended in twisted metal on a quiet road. Dottie West, 1991. Dottie West was more than a country singer. She was Nashville royalty, beloved for her powerful voice and trailblazing career. But her final days were as heartbreaking as any country ballad. In September of 1991, Dottie was on her way to the Grand Ole Opry when she accepted a ride from a neighbor. The car spun out of control, crashing at high speed. Though Dottie initially survived, her injuries were devastating. She held on in the hospital for days, but the damage was too severe. Fans hoped for a miracle, but by early September she was gone at just 58. The tragedy hit the country music world like a hammer. This was a woman who had broken barriers, one of the first female country artists to win a Grammy, a mentor to stars like Kenny Rogers, and a performer who never stopped giving. To lose her while literally on her way to perform for her fans made the story even more crushing. Her death was symbolic in a way. A woman who had poured her heart into every song ended her life in a moment that echoed the themes of her music, love loss, and the fragility of life. Dottie West's final ride became one of country music's most painful chapters, reminding everyone that fame can't buy you a longer tomorrow. Sam Kinison, 1992. Sam Kinison wasn't your average comedian. He didn't tell jokes, he screamed them, blasting audiences with his trademark shout and raw delivery. But in April of 1992, Kinison's booming voice was silenced in a violent collision on a desert highway in California. Kinison and his wife were heading to a show when a pickup truck driven by a teenager crossed into their lane. The crash was catastrophic. Kinison, just 38, reportedly spoke a few words after the impact before passing away. His new wife survived with injuries, but the comedy world was shattered. Sam's death carried a cruel irony. He had lived a wild life, burning bridges, shocking crowds, and fighting battles, both personal and professional. Yet in the final years, he seemed to be calming down, rebuilding his career even, embracing a steadier life. And then gone. The loss was felt far beyond comedy clubs. Kinison had influenced an entire generation of performers with his raw energy and refusal to play it safe. His passing left fans replaying his loudest routines, realizing that his roar would echo forever, but never be heard live again. For someone who lived life at full volume, his sudden silence was deafening. Lisa Left Eye Lopes, 2002. Lisa Lopes wasn't just a member of TLC, she was its spark, the one who stood out with her fearless energy and unapologetic personality. But in April of 2002, the music world was stunned when she lost her life in a car accident in Honduras. Lisa was behind the wheel of an SUV when it veered off the road and flipped multiple times. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and the impact proved fatal. At just 31 of pop's brightest stars was gone. What made the tragedy even more haunting was the footage left behind. Lopes had been filming a documentary about her spiritual journey, and the camera captured moments right before the crash. Fans watching later were left chilled, as if fate had been caught on tape. Her passing devastated TLC, one of the biggest groups of the 90s. They had already battled through personal struggles and industry pressures, and now they had to continue without the fiery member who gave them so much character. Lisa's death was more than a headline. It was a reminder that no amount of fame can protect you from the randomness of the road. For fans, it felt like music itself lost a piece of its heartbeat that day. Albert Camus, 1960. Albert Camus wasn't a movie star or a singer. He was a thinker, a Nobel Prize-winning writer whose works like The Stranger and The Myth of Sisyphus reshaped literature. Yet his life ended in a way so abrupt and ordinary that it almost felt surreal. In January of 1960, Camus accepted a ride with a friend in a fast-driving sports car in France. The car skidded on icy roads, crashed into a tree, and Camus was killed instantly. He was just 46. The literary world reeled. Here was a man who had written about fate, absurdity, and the unpredictability of existence, and his own death felt like a cruel proof of his philosophy. In his briefcase was an unused train ticket sparking endless what-ifs. If he had taken the train as planned, would he have lived to write more? His passing robbed the world of decades of possible brilliance. Critics and fans speculated about the books he never got to write. The ideas left unwritten. For many, Camus' death became a metaphor. Life is absurd, unpredictable, and unfair, just as he had said. Albert Camus' end was both tragic and fitting, leaving behind a legacy where his philosophy and his fate collided head-on. Jane Mansfield, 1967. Jane Mansfield's death is one of the most infamous in Hollywood history. The blonde bombshell of the 1950s and 60s was known for her bold personality movie roles and larger-than-life image. But on a June night in 1967, she met a fate so brutal that it became the stuff of legend. Mansfield was traveling in a car with her children and boyfriend when their vehicle slammed into the back of a truck on a Louisiana highway. Mansfield and the two adults in the front seat were killed instantly. Miraculously, her 3 young children in the back, including future actress Mariska Hargitay, survived. The tragedy shocked the nation. Mansfield had been a constant figure in tabloids and films, often compared to Marilyn Monroe. Now her sudden death seemed like a cruel mirror of Hollywood's obsession with youth and beauty. The accident also led to change. Outrage over the crash pushed regulators to add underride guards on the backs of trucks' metal bars designed to prevent cars from sliding underneath in collisions. They became known in some circles as Mansfield bars. Her death was more than a Hollywood headline. It reshaped safety laws and left behind one of the most haunting stories of fame colliding with fate. Jane Mansfield's image was glamorous, but her end was a stark reminder of life's fragility. Mark Bolan, 1977. Mark Bolan, the frontman of T-Rex, was the face of glam rock in the 70s. Wild hair glitter on his cheeks and songs that electrified stadiums. But on a September night in 1977, the sparkle went dark. Bolan was in the passenger seat of a purple Mini driven by his girlfriend Gloria Jones. Just before reaching their London home, the car skidded off the road and slammed into a tree. Bolan was killed instantly. He was just 29. The irony was cruel. Bolan had a fear of driving and never got a license, often telling friends he didn't want to tempt fate. Yet fate found him anyway. Gloria survived with injuries, but Mark's career and life was over in a flash. For fans, the news was devastating. T-Rex had given the world hits like Bang a Gong, Get It On, and helped launch the entire glam movement. Bolan wasn't just a rock star, he was a style, a sound, a cultural shift. His death left a glittering genre without its brightest light. In London, mourners gathered at the crash site, covering the tree with flowers and messages. It remains a shrine to this day, proving that Bolan's music didn't die with him. His sudden, shocking end turned him from a star into a legend, forever frozen in the glam glow of the 70s. Eddie Cochran, 1960. Eddie Cochran's career was like a spark, brief but blinding. By the late 1950s, he had become one of the pioneers of rock and roll, known for hits like Summertime Blues. But in April of 1960, that spark was extinguished on a British road. Cochran was touring the UK when his taxi blew a tire near Chippenham. The car crashed into a lamppost. Cochran was thrown from the vehicle and badly injured. He was rushed to the hospital, but died. Hours later, just 21 years old. His death hit the rock world hard. Eddie wasn't just another singer, he was an innovator blending country blues and rock into something new. He inspired the likes of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, who later credited him as a major influence. Losing him so young felt like the genre itself had been robbed of a future. Adding to the tragedy, Cochran's fiancée-songwriter Sharon Sheeley survived the crash, as did his friend Gene Vincent, who was left with permanent injuries. That night changed the course of rock history forever. Eddie Cochran's passing was a reminder of how quickly music's brightest flames can flicker out. Though his career lasted only a few years, his songs still echo as a soundtrack for rebellion, and his death made him an eternal symbol of rock and roll's dangerous edge. Isadora Duncan, 1927. Isadora Duncan was no ordinary dancer. She revolutionized modern dance with flowing movements and free-spirited style. But her death in September of 1927 remains one of the most bizarre and tragic in celebrity history. Duncan was riding in a convertible in France when her signature accessory, a long flowing silk scarf, got caught in the rear wheel of the car. In an instant, she was pulled violently from her seat. Witnesses described it as a shocking, surreal scene, one that ended her life at the age of 50. The world was stunned. Here was a woman who had defined freedom in art, felled by the very symbol of her style. Her scarf, once a mark of grace, became the instrument of her demise. Newspapers struggled to describe the freak nature of the accident, and the story spread around the globe. In the arts community, Duncan's death became a grim metaphor. She had lived her life with daring freedom, rejecting tradition at every turn. Yet her end reminded everyone of the thin line between beauty and danger. Even today, her passing is remembered less as a random accident and more as a tragic legend. Isadora Duncan left behind not only a legacy of movement, but also one of the strangest and most haunting celebrity endings ever recorded. Cliff Burton, 1986. Cliff Burton wasn't just a bassist, he was the soul of early Metallica. Fans loved his raw power, his stage presence, and his refusal to compromise. But in September of 1986, while the band was on tour in Sweden, fate struck. The group's tour bus was traveling overnight when it skidded on icy roads and flipped. Burton, who had been sleeping in a bunk, was thrown from the bus and crushed. At just 24, Metallica's future was thrown into chaos. The band was devastated. James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich both described running around the crash site in disbelief, unable to process what had just happened. They had lost not just a bandmate, but a brother. Burton had been instrumental in shaping Metallica's sound on their early albums, and his death left a hole that could never fully be filled. Fans around the world lit candles, wore patches with his name, and held vigils. Cliff wasn't a typical rock star. He was a musician's musician, a man who cared more about art than fame. His passing turned him into a cult hero, forever enshrined in the history of heavy metal. Cliff Burton's death was more than a tour tragedy. It was the moment Metallica grew up overnight, carrying the shadow of that Swedish road with them into every stage they ever played again. Steve Prefontaine, 1975. Steve Prefontaine wasn't an entertainer, he was an athlete. But in the world of sports, he was a rock star. The American long-distance runner electrified crowds with his gutsy performances, breaking records, and defying expectations. Yet his story ended tragically on an Oregon road in May of 1975. After attending a track meet and a party with fellow athletes, Prefontaine was driving home when his car flipped and trapped him beneath it. He was just 24 years old. The loss was staggering. Prefontaine had been the face of American running, carrying hopes for Olympic dominance. He wasn't just fast, he was charismatic, fiery, and unafraid to challenge the establishment. His rivalry with authorities over athlete rights made him a folk hero long before his career was complete. In Eugene, Oregon, his death turned him into a legend. Fans left flowers and running shoes at the crash site, which became known as Pre's Rock, a memorial that still draws visitors today. Prefontaine's passing wasn't just a blow to sports, it was a cultural shock. He embodied youthful defiance and limitless potential, and then in an instant, he was gone. His unfinished story still haunts the track world, reminding us that greatness doesn't always get to see its finish line. Harry Chapin, 1981. Harry Chapin wasn't just a singer-songwriter, he was a storyteller. With songs like Cats in the Cradle and Taxi, he carved out a place as one of music's most heartfelt voices. But in July of 1981, his life ended in a devastating car crash on a New York highway. Chapin was driving to a benefit concert when his Volkswagen Rabbit stalled in the middle lane of the Long Island Expressway. Moments later, a truck slammed into him from behind, igniting a fireball. Witnesses tried to pull him out, but the flames were overwhelming. He was only 38. What made the loss even more painful was that Harry wasn't just a performer. He was a humanitarian, devoting much of his time and earnings to fighting hunger. Friends and fans said he lived more for his causes than his career. His sudden passing robbed both the music industry and the world of a relentless advocate for good. Chapin's death was shocking, not just because of the crash, but because of what he represented. He was a man who sang about life's small stories while trying to make the big world better. And then, in an instant, his own story was cut short in the cruelest way. Jeanette Del Rio, 1980s. Jeanette Del Rio may not be a household name worldwide, but in Mexico, she was a rising star, a singer and actress known for her charisma and talent. Her tragic car accident in the 1980s shocked Latin America, where fans had embraced her as a fresh voice of entertainment. Details of the crash were heartbreaking. Driving late at night, Jeanette's car veered off the road and struck a barrier. The impact ended her life instantly. She was still so young, with her career just gaining momentum, and fans were left wondering what heights she might have reached. The response in Mexico was immediate and emotional. Crowds attended her funeral, and radio stations played her songs non-stop. For many, her death was a reminder of how fragile celebrity can be. One moment you're climbing toward stardom, the next, everything is gone. Jeanette Del Rio's passing is still remembered by those who grew up watching and listening to her. Though her fame didn't stretch globally, the shock of her sudden death echoes the same way it does for international icons. The lesson was universal. Car accidents don't care about borders or fame or promise. Bessie Smith, 1937. Known as the Empress of the Blues, Bessie Smith had a voice that could shatter hearts and move mountains, but in September of 1937, her life ended in a tragic car accident in Mississippi. Smith was traveling with her partner when their car collided with a truck. The crash left her critically injured, and though she was rushed to a hospital, she never recovered. She was 43. Her death became one of the most shocking events in music history. Smith wasn't just a performer. She was a cultural force, one of the highest-paid black entertainers of her era, and a woman who helped shape the very foundation of American blues and jazz. Losing her at the peak of her power left fans devastated and fellow musicians stunned. Bessie's passing marked the end of an era, but her influence lived on. Artists from Billie Holiday to Janis Joplin cited her as an inspiration. The crash robbed the world of her future, but it also cemented her legend. She became not just a star of her time, but a symbol of how fragile greatness can be. Princess Astrid of Belgium, 1935. Princess Astrid of Belgium lived a fairy tale that ended in sudden tragedy. In August of 1935, while on holiday in Switzerland, she and her husband, King Leopold III, were driving near Lake Lucerne. The car veered off the road and crashed into a tree. Astrid was thrown from the vehicle and killed instantly. She was only 29. Her death stunned not only Belgium, but the entire European continent. Astrid was beloved by the public for her warmth and compassion, and her sudden loss plunged the nation into mourning. Newspapers printed black-bordered headlines, and thousands lined the streets for her funeral. The crash also deeply affected King Leopold, who never fully recovered emotionally from the loss of his young wife. For Belgium, Astrid's passing wasn't just a royal tragedy, it was a national heartbreak. She had embodied grace, charm, and modern spirit, and suddenly all of it was gone. Princess Astrid's story stands as one of the earliest high-profile examples of how even royalty with all their privilege cannot escape the randomness of fate on the road. Her death remains etched into the history of European monarchies as one of the most shocking and devastating accidents of the 20th century. Fame may shine bright, but these 19 shocking car accidents proved how quickly it can all vanish. From movie stars to royalty, from music legends to athletes, each story left the world gasping. Which one shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. Share this with someone who loves unforgettable history, and subscribe for more. Because sometimes the most chilling endings are the ones that come without warning.